The latest ruling has prompted a flurry of responses. Republicans are hailing the decision while Democrats are vowing to continue the fight. More companies are weighing in, announcing they'll cover abortion travel expenses for their employees. Former President Donald Trump praised the decision, calling it, quote, the biggest win for life in a generation. Trump said this is made possible because of 3 conservative justices that he appointed. Former President Barack Obama criticized the Supreme Court for reversing the nearly 50 years of precedent. Obama said abortion should be left to a personal decision. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says this is a victory for the right to life.
This great nation can now live up to its core principle that all are created equal, not born equal, created equal.
While Speaker Pelosi describes this as an insult to women.
It's a slap in the face to women about using their own judgment to make their own decisions about their reproductive freedom.
Abortion bans went into immediate effect in the states of Louisiana, Missouri, Kentucky, and South Dakota. At least 13 states have trigger laws to pose abortion restrictions immediately or soon following the ruling. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders vowed the fight is not over.
And in New York and all over this nation, that fierce resistance will rise.
A number of companies have announced they will cover travel expenses for employees seeking abortions. In recent days, concerns over attacks on our way of government have been raised, whether it be how the Constitution is slowly being chipped away as more laws are passed restricting rights that the framers of the Constitution deemed God-given, or the undermining of decisions made by the judiciary. Some say that this is setting a dangerous tone for our way of government, which ultimately impacts our way of life. Congressman Larry Bucshon of Indiana is a physician and a scholar of the Constitution, and we're happy to have him on to discuss. Congressman Larry Bucshon, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Congressman, President Biden just called out the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. He called it a tragic error. What is your reaction to that comment?
Well, obviously, I disagree. I think, everybody has a right to their opinion, including the President of the United States. But, our form of government includes 3 branches of government, one of which is the Supreme Court. And, it's their role to adjudicate cases based on the Constitution and the way they evaluate and determine each case and its constitutionality and whether or not it's correct. And they determined that the decision on Roe v. Wade from 1973 was not judged properly, and they overturned it. And and stated that constitutionally that abortion rights are not there in the U.S. Constitution, and that it should be determined by elected officials, and they determined that should be at the state level. So, the president has the right to his opinion. But the one thing I tell you, I think we have to stop doing is every time we have a decision from the Supreme Court, and I'd say this to Republicans too, that we use derisive, bad terminology as it relates to the court. It's part of our government. It's an independent third branch. And even though we may disagree, we have to respect their decisions.
Congressman, you kind of answered my follow-up question, which is, do comments like this have a damaging effect or undermine our system of government that's in place?
They absolutely do. And, we've seen this happen, honestly, on both sides. Historically, you won't see me do that. I mean, when the decision came down to retain Obamacare, when I first got into Congress, I disagreed with that. I thought the law was not constitutional and wasn't the right direction to go. But you didn't see me, use derisive terms about the court and their decision. They're the third branch of government. They're in the Constitution. And if we want the American people to respect our institutions in this country, whether that's our police, our courts, our school systems, and our government as a whole, we ourselves cannot use this type of rhetoric.
Congressman, Jane's Revenge is a pro-abortion group. They've made some of the following statements. I'm going to read to you quickly here online. They're saying, we're asking you for what you can do to make your anger known. They're also saying, if abortion isn't safe, you aren't either. Are you concerned about domestic terrorism potentially coming from these types of groups? and especially the safety of the Supreme Court justices?
Absolutely. I think the safety of the Supreme Court justices can be at risk, and also legislators, both at the federal and state and local level, if they disagree with this particular group. And statements like that need to be taken seriously by the Justice Department and make sure that they are investigating these groups when they make threatening remarks like this. And I want to reiterate, I would say this if this was coming from the political right. You cannot be making these type of statements. Our country is on edge right now for economic reasons. Gas prices are very high, inflation's up, cost of living is way up, people are nervous. And so this inflammatory rhetoric is inappropriate and honestly should be investigated by the Justice Department.
And Congressman, lastly, before I let you go, just the constitutionality of this ruling. There's a lot of emotion kind of mixed in. As a lawmaker, can you just kind of explain what this actually means?
Well, what they determined is that constitutionally, the right to an abortion is not in the Constitution. And it isn't one of the fundamental rights granted to the American people in the U.S. Constitution. It hasn't been in an amendment to the Constitution. And so I think this is a victory for the originalist view of the Constitution. And that's what's been determined. And so what they have said is there's no constitutional reason why state legislatures can't make decisions based on their own views of whether or not abortion should be legal, limited, or completely legal altogether. And that's basically what this does. It just basically says, from an originalist perspective, the right to an abortion is not in the Constitution.
Congressman Larry Bucshon, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And with the High Court handing down a huge decision granting New Yorkers more freedom in their right to bear arms, Cheryl Chumley, the online opinion editor at the Washington Times, joins us to discuss. Cheryl Chumley, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Cheryl, outside of the landmark ruling that we're watching unfold here that was just released overturning Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court has just made another ruling on a concealed carry gun law in New York State. Many prominent Democrats, from the mayor of New York City to the governor, came out and reeled that the city and state are now less safe because of it. Do you think that this is the case?
No, I think this was a common sense ruling on the part of the Supreme Court. And honestly, I think it was an opportunity for the liberal faction of the court to show that they weren't politicized, because it just seems so common sense that the idea of carrying handguns outside your home is part and parcel of what founding fathers intended with the Second Amendment. And the fact that the three liberals on the court couldn't come to that conclusion, and in fact seemed to side with the emotional arguments about the Second Amendment, talking more and focusing more on gun violence around the nation than on the constitutional merits of what they had to decide, just shows me that the far left in America is really on a crash course to dismantle the Second Amendment any way it can.
Cheryl, on the other hand, Congress is now getting ready to pass legislation further restricting gun rights. What do you make of this schism?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? A step forward for Second Amendment with the court, the High Court, and now a step back with Republicans, really, in the Senate. 15 Republicans signing on to the concept of red flag laws, which is part and parcel of this legislation, which I do not see how red flag laws in any shape or form meet constitutional muster, because on face value, they strip due process from legal carrying Americans from legal carrying Americans. And the fact that Republicans have sided with Democrats on this issue is astonishing to me, and I hope it gets struck down, if not by sane thinking politicians in the House, then eventually by courts.
Can you kind of explain red flag laws and also what has you concerned about them?
What has me concerned it can best be explained by an example. Say I post something on social media that somebody deems as violent and dangerous, and then under red flag laws, that person could take my post to deemed authorities to bring to court, and then I could be placed in a position in court of proving that I am sane enough to maintain my Second Amendment rights. While meanwhile, the other side, the accusing side, can just use my post, my social media post, to show that I may be a danger to society and I should lose my Second Amendment rights for a certain period of time. It strips the whole due process, and it flips on its head the notion of innocent until proven guilty. And if you think about the bureaucrats and where this could lead in courts down the line, it could very easily be used to weaponize the left, to give the left a weapon to strip Second Amendment rights from any Americans they deem unworthy.
And Cheryl, do you see this as a kind of a gradual gun grab that over time will just keep chipping away at the Second Amendment?
Absolutely. Anytime the left talks about common sense gun reform, and that's common sense in air quotes, you have to question how common sense it really is. If we really want to address the roots of gun-related violence in this country, we have to start looking at things like broken homes, fatherless homes, abuse in homes, and the factors that lead people to take up arms and shoot their fellow citizens in the first place.
Cheryl Chumley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, has been charged for driving under the influence of alcohol. Paul Pelosi was involved in a car collision in the middle of the night last month in Napa, California. His 2021 model Porsche collided with a Jeep, totaling both the Jeep and his Porsche. His blood sample was tested for alcohol level. The Napa County District Attorney's Office issued a criminal complaint charging Paul Pelosi with a misdemeanor. This is based on the level of injury during the collision. However, the decision has come under scrutiny because no such details have been given. Under California law, the penalty can include up to 5 years of probation, a minimum of 5 days in jail, and installation of an ignition interlock device. Paul Pelosi's court date in Napa County Superior Court is August 3rd. Details of the incident have been slow to emerge, and some key questions still remain.